Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Soul Rose Show. I am Cherie Burton, and this is a podcast where ancient feminine wisdom meets the modern path of soul evolution. We're going to be talking today with Mélanie Ann Layer, founder of the Alpha Femme brand. She's known for her unique approach to feminine leadership and wealth energetics. She's going to share her story from literal abject poverty to fierce feminine power and all of the growth and evolution of her brand, which has consistent $1 million months since November of 2020 and even $1 million weeks and days. Her revolutionary teachings are so powerful. Her unconventional approach to the online world has been really exciting and magnetizing. In this episode, we are dialing in on what it means to be self-actualized. This is a topic that has always intrigued me, and I wanted to have this discussion with Mélanie because she has some really great insights on how we can let go of the old programming around being successful. If you were to look at her Alpha Femme brand on Instagram at Alpha Femme, you'll see how beautiful her brand is and how clean it is and how dialed in to her energy that it is. And aside from brand building, self-actualization obviously is its own animus. It's claiming your full feminine potential. And we're going to talk about what that means and also how to hold the empowerment mindset so you can really step into it. Remember to ask to join our private Facebook group, the Soul Rose Community. We've got free monthly live mini classes. Follow me on Instagram at cherie.burton and Mélanie on Instagram at Alpha Femme. What a blessing to get to meet the Alpha Femme incarnate. How are you, Mélanie?
I'm so good. I'm excited to be here.
And just with our pre-conversation, I feel like, I saw your essence, which and your brand, which I told you is just absolutely stunning.
Thank
But
you.
it's so good to know and feel of your soul. And I would love for our people to get to know what makes you tick. So let's kind of dive right into that. Why and how did this work call you to bring women to sovereignty, to find their essence, to find who they are, and to create wealth if that's their desire?
So it's such an interesting question when anyone asks me that. And anyone who's listened to a few podcasts of mine have heard me say this, but it's like every person has the highway of their lives. And there's so many different junctions where the story can start. Like the story can start right at the beginning, the story can start in the middle, the story can start. So there's so many different places that I could start telling my story. But I think the most potent part, just for the well being of a short episode like this, is that in 2013, I'd been in a relationship for like 7 years with a person I knew was not the right person for me, but I couldn't leave. I was 25 and I thought I was old already and thought I'd invested so much time already and didn't really know what I wanted to be when I grew up. And it felt like time was running out and everything was just kind of not working great in my life. And on this one day, I don't know what happened. I just decided I was ending the relationship. Nothing brought it necessarily to a grinding halt. It just hit me that this was the day. And I broke up with this partner who had really intertwined in my life at the time. He'd become my manager at the job I was working at. It was a commission only job. And so when I broke up with him, he fired me and I couldn't work in my area anymore. The only way I could keep my job was to move like a 200-kilometer radius outside of my hometown, which had never been a problem for me before. I used to sell like on infomercials, live infomercials in stores, and I really enjoyed the job, commission only. And so I'd stay in hotels. I'd pay for my hotel from my earnings. But the weirdest thing happened. It was like the minute my heart got broken, because even though I broke up with him, I still was addicted to the relationship. And so the minute my heart got broken, I could not sell anymore. And I went from being the top salesperson in the entire company to not being able to sell at all. And everything just started to break down. Eventually, I couldn't pay for my bills and I couldn't pay for my hotel room. And I ended up having to sleep in the front seat of my car in the parking lot trying to make ends meet. And I ended up staying in that car for a while. I went bankrupt. And at that point, I had been at odds with my family for a little while because it just felt like we were not on the same page. Like they had high expectations for me and I wasn't meeting any of them. And there was a lot of judgment. And I felt like they didn't get me. And I'd overgiven a lot in my life for validation, which hadn't really gone well. And there's just a lot of pressure on my family, a lot of pressure on me. And so I didn't really tell anyone how bad things were for me. And I didn't think they cared. And the whole thing was just a mess. It's like an ego battle and a heartbreak battle. And I lost myself entirely. So got diagnosed with depression and anxiety, went bankrupt in the front seat of my Honda Civic. The whole thing, my whole life just kind of fell apart. And in that few months in the winter, sleeping in my car, running out of money, just rationing gas in the car, going days without food, absolutely no resources to shelter or help. Even mental health, like at that point, was not a focus in my life. And so everything just felt very stressed and very disconnected. And I felt lost, very, very lost. And I just remember being in my car, being completely angry at this boyfriend that I'd had and feeling like he was responsible for the entire downfall of my life, which obviously was not true, but at that point felt very true. And I will never forget that day. I was like, sitting in my car and I had Googled how to make your ex-boyfriend cry. Like, I was so bitter and just upset at everything, and the crazy thing is when I did that, there was this ad that came up on Google, and it was like, "How to have the relationship you want." And I'm like, even Google doesn't have an answer to my awful question, like, what am I doing? I'm still making all of this about someone else. Even now, it's not about me. Even now, I'm lost, and so I went down this journey. This coach, her name was Rory Ray, and she had this program called
Or actually,
so she had this thing, have the relationship you want. And I had no money on my credit card whatsoever, but I just felt like I have to have this program. I put my credit card information in, and somehow the card had been declined for gas, food, everything, but it went through for that program. And I listened to this one program every minute of every day for months. And it really started to open up my mind about feminine and masculine energetics. It started to open my mind about how I was very responsible for the outcome of that relationship and the outcome of my life. And it put me on a trajectory of personal development. At the time, I had absolutely no idea it would ever impact anyone else. I really thought it was for me. But through a lot of research that I did, even reading documents I would find online and things about energetics, that's really the thing that I got the most out of the teachings was like how the masculine leaning forward energy and the feminine leaning back energy were so different. I started learning about manifestation and all these incredible things. And my life started to change. For me, the way I felt started to change. And even though my financial situation wasn't necessarily changing, my experience of this really difficult time in my life was changing. I felt empowered. I felt renewed. I felt hopeful. I felt all different energies without even my life changing at all. And what kind of happened for me is a friend that I hadn't spoken to in a really long time called me out of nowhere. Her relationship wasn't going well and she just needed help. And I had been studying all these things for me. So I was just very generous with what I'd been working on for my own healing. She was like, I've never had anyone explain it the way you just have. Like, I've read books and I know things, but the way you just delivered it was out of this world. And she ended up talking about me to some of her friends who then wanted sessions. There's no session. Like, this was just me. You're my friend. I didn't want to tell her I was sleeping in the front seat of my car. I was like, I'm not in a position to be coaching anybody. But it was like, no, they want your help. I have friends that want this. And I was just like, oh my God. I ended up starting my coaching business from the front seat of my Honda Civic. It was a word of mouth only business. I was the invisible coach. And so my clients didn't even know who I was. They sent a bank transfer, like e-transfer at the time. And I would just coach them from the front seat of my car. It was all about relationships and personal power, not the need to change external circumstances, but the need to change your experience of your current circumstances so you can empower yourself. That was the whole vibe of it. And I built a six-figure business from the front seat of my car.
love it.
I eventually started meeting clients and eventually was a little less invisible. In 2016, I started going online, doing Facebook Lives. 2017, I launched Alpha Femme. In 2018, we had our first $1 million year. My life completely turned around. And I've built this extraordinary business. I've got clients all over the world now. I'm definitely not invisible anymore. And I've changed absolutely every single aspect of my life since then. And so what I'm really helping people with now is the understanding that you've got to start by changing your experience of your circumstances before the circumstances change. You don't wait for the circumstances to change. You change, then the circumstances do. And I feel like my entire body of work is based on helping people reclaim their understanding of their worth and their value, regardless of what they've achieved, what they have, and what it looks like. So they can actually create something that's in alignment, not constantly chasing validation, a life of fulfilled joy, fulfillment, and success, not just success as it appears to be good through other people's
Right.
lens.
Right. I love that kind of that pitiful, pivotal juncture for you. Freudian slip there. Was that you came to a place of self-awareness and self-responsibility. It's like, what have I done to create the circumstances that I'm in instead of projecting or blaming? And when we get hurt, we feel like a victim. It's pretty easy to do that. I mean, I feel like that is the world mentality, don't you? Is this victim mentality. So what like, if you could go back and, like, be in that embodied place of, like, when did the light bulb turn on? It's me, right? Like, it's all me. How did that happen?
It's so wild because it came in different moments, but one of the moments that really shook me was when I Googled how to make your ex-boyfriend cry, and the answer was how The thing that I was shown instead was how to have the relationship you want. And I realized like I am asking the wrong questions.
Mhm.
Why am I still asking that question? Have I not learned anything? Like that was a huge shameful breakthrough. I was like sitting ashamed of myself in the front seat of my car. Like, how am I still making it about this when no one's watching? That's really what I want to know. I want to know how to get revenge. I want to know how to be happy. I don't want to know how to make my life right. I just want, like, what is this?
Yeah.
That was the first big breakthrough. And I think another huge pivotal moment for me, there's so many things that could be to blame for this. And I'm grateful for all of them. But there are times where I didn't eat for like a week.
Wow.
And I was freezing cold. I was rationing gas in my car. Like I realized in hindsight, I really did have one of those huge breakthroughs that I don't think many people ever have the chance to go through. Because usually when you're going through hell, you numb with something. You watch TV, you watch Netflix, you get a glass of wine, yeah, you eat sugar or something that's going to give you a temporary high. You talk about something with someone that's going to listen to you talk badly about something. You have an outlet.
Right.
And during those periods of time, there was no outlet. So if I had a bad feeling, I had to sit with the bad feeling. There was nothing to numb it.
Yeah.
And there was this
That's
one
it.
night I'll never forget. I think I was on day 6 of no food at that point. No food, freezing cold, not a lot of sleep, sleeping in the front seat of my car. Every time the snowplow truck would come to clean the snow, it would wake me up. It would stress me, like nervous system shot to hell, completely exhausted, tired, hungry, sad, brokenhearted, feeling like a failure. Like the whole thing is totally messed up. I've been crying all evening, and all of a sudden, this big snowstorm happens. And I'm sitting in the front seat of my car. My window, like the sky roof is open, but not open where it could snow in the car, but just so I can see out the window. And I'm leaned back in the front seat and I'm looking up, and the lights from the parking lot are shining on the big snowflakes that are falling. And I'm like a small child that's cried too much. I'm in the
Yeah.
phase of
The
the crying.
stuck-ups.
And big tears are streaming down my face. I'm exhausted. I'm half La La Land at this point, but something happened and I can't explain what, but all of a sudden I saw this big fat snowflake and it was falling really slowly and it caught the light in the parking lot. And it was just, I caught it from really high up and it was falling and I got this weird hot feeling in my body. And my tears changed from absolute sadness and grief and I don't know what the hell's wrong with me to wow, like brought to my knees beauty and gratitude. And nothing had changed in my life. I'm still cold. I'm still hungry. I'm still tired. I'm still exhausted. I'm still heartbroken. But for some reason, I saw the beauty in what was going on in that moment. And
Mhm.
I just started crying a different kind of tears. And gratitude, a different kind of gratitude than had ever hit me. And I said to myself, I've got to see life through this lens. If I can feel this, I won't lose myself again. And I started really paying attention and building a life where I often get that hot feeling of gratitude for very simple things, no matter how successful I've become, to really
Mhm.
have moments where the simplest thing takes over me. And I feel like that was a huge turning point in my life because it had me stop chasing success and it had me start walking towards fulfillment. And I realized that they're very close and they work well together, but success without fulfillment isn't success. And
Wow.
fulfillment isn't what it is, it's what it feels. So you can be successful in what it looks and not successful in what it feels, in which case it's not
Oh,
success.
I would say, and maybe you would back me up on this, that a lot of the people that I'm associated with who have reached, let's just say, a measure of material success or even a personal achievement, and it can't relish in it. Like, and I honestly, I've been there. I get it. Like, I used to be a checklisted high achiever, the classic recovering high achiever, where it's like, okay, if this happens, then I'll feel this. But I
Yeah.
wouldn't allow myself to cultivate the feeling in advance like you're discussing, where you saw that snowflake and you were in awe and wonder of the beauty of what already was coming to you. That realization didn't come until much later in my life. And I was really just like, the tree has borne fruit. How come I can't just pluck the fruit and eat of the beauty and the goodness that has been created? Why do I keep chasing, like you talked about, chasing success? And furthermore, what is success? I have a different definition of success now, but how do you define success for yourself? And how do you allow other women to define that? What's that process for defining that for oneself?
So the crazy thing about success, in my opinion, is it has to change and it has to change often and it has to be able to change without resistance. That's one of the big things about success because the way I see it, we want so many different experiences that are actually entirely different. And so if you think about being young and innocent and dreaming of the future with your imagination at its peak, the definition of success for us from the moment we started imagining success was that we could have anything and we could be anything. And that frequency of anything, it feels so expansive. It feels like freedom. It feels like happiness. It feels like I can choose what I want. I can go what I want. I can pivot. I can course correct, like the frequency of anything. And where I think people get lost is that that frequency gets changed just a tiny little bit to everything.
Mm,
And then that adds pressure and it makes it that people aren't very good at making choices. Because the fact is, when you can have anything, it's usually because you haven't made a choice about anything yet. Because if I say you can be anything you want when you grow up, well, that's true until the day you've got to make a choice. Then on that day, it's not anything anymore. It's this one choice that I'm making. And a lot of us see that choice as lack. And in that immature moment where we see choice as lack, we then decide we need to have everything. And that's where we break the chase for success because it stops being the imagination, the freedom, the bliss of anything. And it starts becoming the pressure and the need for everything. So we never experience the lack of choice because of choice.
right.
And so for me, what it is staying in that open frequency of anything and saying, even though I'm choosing this year or this month, success could be something else for me later down the line.
Yeah.
I could be this career and that career. I could live in this country and that country. I could have this house and then I could sell and I could live there. I could be a nomad and then I could have a mansion in Italy and then I could live in a tiny little log house somewhere in the mountains and then
Yeah.
there's so many different chapters of my life and I don't need to have all of them at one time, but I keep the frequency of anything open and I'm flexible and I can move and I can pivot. And to me, for me, that's what success feels like is that I can always adapt at the moment I want it to. And I keep
Mm.
the frequency of anything.
That's absolutely beautiful. I love that. I love the malleability and the fluidity and the openness, which is very feminine, right?
Yes,
The open state of like, I'm going to receive what is for my highest. I may not intellectually have the capacity at this moment, but maybe the universe has a bigger dream and a bigger possibility that's waiting for me. And that was my old thinking because everything had been handed to me of what to believe, what to think, what was going to be, what, you know what I mean? Like, so I got like locked in and I felt like I was just in a bit of a prison. Like, and then I felt guilty for wanting what I wanted. Right.
totally.
So, oh, I want to go there actually, because you seem to me a person who has let that go. Just, all right, this is the life I want to live. This is the vibe I want to be in. I mean, because we're all just searching for a feeling. Even if we get all the things we want and we check and everything, like we just want to be with certain feelings. We all value feelings differently. Like my core value, deeply desired feelings are different than yours, et cetera. But for you, like, how did you? Because I'm sure this was a process. It didn't happen overnight. Give yourself that permission. I don't know what your programming was when you grew up, or if you had to bust through all those limitations or of shame and guilt and whatever. But that was one of my biggest things because I shared with you earlier, like I've been the breadwinner for my family of seven since 2010. Like I've traveled the world and I was in a really tight culture where that wasn't apropos. In fact, it was completely looked down on, especially for a woman and a mother. So I had my own process of kind of working through that. But you strike me as someone who, like, I don't know if this was just kind of always you, and you're like, have these big dreams, or if this was just a process of like distillation or a drip process for you where you're like, no, like this is me and this is how I want to be with the world. And, so maybe whatever you feel comfortable sharing there is great.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of you really tapped into something there because I think that there are people who are probably born with this like very self-expressed, very open. I can do whatever I want, I can say whatever I want, and I have no fear, but I was definitely not brought up that way. As a matter of fact, one of the reasons my family and I had such a bit of a back in those years, like that clash, was because I was always disappointing them for who they thought I needed to be. And it wasn't coming from a bad place in them whatsoever. It really came from a place of like fearing for me, if we're being honest, like They wanted me to have the education they never had. They wanted me to make choices that they felt maybe they made the wrong choices. Like, I remember my dad saying, because I had a hard time with traditional education, my brain just couldn't remember the things under pressure.
Mhm.
And so I realized later I have a very emotional brain. And so if I care about something, I'll remember everything. I'll remember every line to a movie, every lyric to a song. I'll remember exactly what you said. But if you ask me to remember, like memorize things, I can practice and practice and practice. But if there's no heart connection, the minute I sit in front of the exam sheet, my brain goes blank. If there's no heart anchor, my mind will not remember the information. And that's really difficult in school when you're learning about things you don't really care about and nothing is sticking. And I remember my dad saying, if you do not figure out how to make this happen, you will fail at life.
Mm.
It will be hard for you. And no man of value is going to want to be with a person who doesn't have an education and can't get themselves. Everything's going to get impacted by this. And it'll be hard for you to lead your kids. Like, you got to do this. And I was just
Were
like,
you, sorry to interrupt you, but were you kind of programmed to think that you needed a partner to bring those things to you? Like that you weren't
probably.
going to be marketable as a
Oh yeah.
potential
And
partner,
not on
right?
purpose. Not on
Right, right,
purpose.
right, right. But that's just what the culture that we were swimming in, right?
Or that even maybe just like being a team with a husband that would at least be able to be a solid equal. Like, how would I even attract an equal at that point?
Hmm.
It would
Yeah.
have to be equal or better, you know what I mean? And so I don't think it was necessarily, because if it would have just been get yourself a good man, then it would have been different. But it was like, you've got to get yourself an education so you can get yourself a good job, so you can find a valuable equal, so you don't have to suffer, so you don't have to. But everything stemmed from the one thing I couldn't do, which felt very upsetting because I was like, well, this is a lot of pressure on the thing I'm incapable of doing right now. And it felt like a lot of the things I wanted to try, I have an artistic soul more than a logical mind. And
Wow.
so that wasn't really valued. I was worried about more than supported and cheered on, because it's not the way the traditional minds are taught to be valued. So I feel like I did have to break through a lot of things, but what ended up really helping me was the moment where I realized I wanted to be happy. And I feel like it's something that I hadn't really considered, that I wanted to be happy. I just wanted other people to be happy so I could be happy.
Mm.
And so it always felt like something that would happen as a byproduct of other people's joy. If I manage to make my parents proud, I'll be happy. If I manage to make my partner proud, I'll be happy. If I manage to make these people appreciate me, then I'll be happy. It was still for my happiness, but my happiness felt like something that would be a byproduct of other people's joy.
Just
And
like
so,
outsourcing, right? Like we were
yes,
talking about projecting and like, yeah,
yeah. So
excited.
it felt like when the joy came from a freaking snowflake alone in a parking lot, when the joy started becoming cultivated by me, there was this breakthrough that was like, I don't need to go through other people to find my joy. That was actually not necessary ever. I don't really know how that might have happened in my life without this, because I wasn't in environments where someone could have taught me that, or I didn't really have a role model of that.
Maybe it was just your higher self or your soul just bringing it to you because you were open.
Yeah. And so I started really feeling this feeling of like, for me, for you, for us. This is
Mm.
like a very solid mantra for me, where I realized if I don't go first, because I used to live a lot of my life like for you and me.
Yeah.
And then what was missing was for us. There's no us, there's nothing solid. And it felt like life was always, if I don't make you happy, you'll leave. If I don't make you happy, you won't like me anymore. And so there was no us. There was nothing solid anchoring any relationship, not even my family relationships, not my romantic relationships. It was for you and for me, for
Mm.
you and for me. When I changed it to for me, for you, I realized it opened the for us, and that for us changed my life. There is no us if there isn't a you and a me. And if I don't go first, what's going to happen is there's always going to be an unlimited amount of yous in my life. There'll be
Mhm.
you, my partner, you, my parents, you, my siblings, you, my friends, you, my clients, So if I say you first and then me, and I just keep getting more impactful and more connected and more influential, well, then me will become less and less and less important and go further down the line until it never happens. So it's got to be me.
Yeah,
So
you're like
for
the
me,
common denominator wherever you are and go and yeah.
so for me first, for me, for you, for us. And when I started leading my life like that, I started modeling that for my clients. And was like, what would it look like if your joy came from you and you still had the generosity and the love to give to other people? That's still a part of who you are. You just change the order, for me, for you, and then you access this us frequency. And it's been a big concept in my work now for years, and it's helped me stay grounded in that. And I think that's where a lot of that independence comes from. And the feeling of this is what I believe in. I don't know that I'm as valuable for the planet if I teach things that I haven't figured out how to embody. And so when I say for me, for you, for us, and I live for me, for you, for us, then when I'm teaching you for me, for us, you get to actually embody that for yourself. And I value that in you, and you value that in me. And I'm not trying to give you more than I've got to make you happy so that one day when I'm not happy, you can give me more than you've got to make me happy. And the whole world's at a deficit because it
Yeah.
always tends to happen that the person needs you to overgive in the season where you've got nothing left to give. That's like the irony of it all. And so it just feels like I don't expect people to do things for me. I expect people to do things for themselves and I celebrate them for that. And I do what I've got to do for me and I celebrate me for that. And I feel it's going to create a much stronger world if everyone can put themselves first and still keep their heart open enough to care about us.
Yeah.
And that's what's given me the freedom to say, I don't need your approval.
Mhm.
Like, I love when we're happy. I love when there's an us, but if you're only happy as long as I do what you want, then there's no us anyway.
Yeah.
So let me focus on the relationships where people value that I'm self-responsible with my emotions and with my life, and that I'm not needing you to see me or validate me or give me something in order for you to be valued in my life. I love your presence and I love you and I value you. And I do the same for myself. And then there's an us. And I feel like everything is stronger in that mentality.
Yeah. I think you're touching on something that's really powerful that, I mean, I don't know if you ever get pushback from like other spiritual leaders or thought leaders or influencers who are kind of in that zone of like, how can you be happy when there's so many things going wrong? And how can you be in this place of talking about abundance when there's people in wars and there's children starving? And the reason I'm bringing that up is because there is pushback happening with different communities. There's sort of like factioning and warring and choosing camps around like, well, if you're not speaking about this really horrible thing and good for you that you're living with all this wealth or whatever. So I bring that up because I have had to work through my own level of I call it survivor guilt as it
Mhm.
relates to having abundance, receiving abundance, allowing it, wanting to feel a certain way where I can still hold compassion and I can hold that duality of like, yes, humanity is literally suffering. But if I join, if my vibe is to always be in the suffering, then I'm not lifting the suffering. So where I had to, and I've also lost a sister to suicide who had 5 children, and I was really close to her. And like, there's that
I'm
survivor guilt,
sorry.
right? Like, so there's just been multiple layers of me trying to like bust through the suffering mentality because I finally, and you were talking about you had to choose to have joy, to be happy. I
Mhm.
felt guilty for that.
Of
I
course.
I was in suffering consciousness because of my religious programming, because of my family history, etcetera, that I thought it was my responsibility to join in the suffering in order to fix it. And what you're talking about is what I came to in a different way, but it was if I don't develop replenishment models for myself, restorative models, if I don't choose into a big timeout, if I'm in hustle culture, if I'm in suffering consciousness, if I'm joining with that mentality, I'm not going to be able to do what my heart really wants to do, which is lift humanity through
Yeah.
my own. And I don't know where it came to me or how, but just within the last couple of years, especially, it was like the greatest work that I will ever do. And this was not taught to me, this was shown to me through a process, is my own work, my own joy, my own peace, my own inner equanimity of the masculine, feminine, balance within. That is my work. It's not what I'm actually doing as a performance to the world. It's what I'm holding energetically. It's what I'm holding vibrationally because I choose to not join in the suffering anymore. And I can't tell you how much stuff, how much crap I had to release of old conditioning to get to that place. Do you find a lot of women that, I mean, I know that you attract more of the higher level women who are kind of like already to a certain place where they're like, okay, let's go. But do you still see the vestiges with high, let's just call them high performance women or women who have huge hearts and huge gifts, right? Those are the women that you mastermind with and you work with. that you attract, but you still see the vestiges of that old mentality and the old programming that we're all fighting to just feel free from, and I just say to shine. That's my brand. It's just come in and just shine as you are. But that shine gets impeded or blocked by that old programming that we have to join in the suffering. Do you see that with some of the women you work with? Hey, just a little break in our episode to let you know that those of you who were on the wait list for the Women's Wisdom Circle, that registration is now live. So this is a 6-month sacred circle for women wayshowers. We are going to begin our journey on spring equinox, March 19th. We will end our journey on autumnal equinox, September of this year. Go to standspeakshine.com/WWC, or you can just go to my website, CherieBurton.com, and you'll see it there on the homepage to find out more. So excited. I actually slashed the price in less than half of what I was going to charge. And so it will include 20-minute clarity call with me, as well as some fun soul declaration cards that I'll ship to you. You will also get 6 months free of my new Mind, Body, Soul membership. So once again, that's CherieBurton.com or standspeakshine.com/WWC. It's going to be glorious alchemy and transformation. I hope you can join us.
So I work with such a diverse range of women. It's just that in close proximity, it only makes sense for financial reasons that it's the women that the women who value my close proximity mentorship now are women who have huge companies with tons of staff, and they need help masterminding around everything that's going on in their lives. Their relationship and a super massive company, and their employees and the leaders within that company, and their responsibilities to the world, and big financial contributions to the government or to wherever it is that they've got to pay, how to release that much money from your bank account to pay taxes and not go into a state of shock, how to navigate the big stuff. And so in close proximity, I work with women who really have a lot to hold in that way, but I offer a product suite for every stage. I even have women who will learn from me who aren't even in business, because I feel like what I have to teach is universal, and I've really been at every stage of this conversation, and there's value at every stage of this conversation. So what I will say is that I have 100% received pushback. I know what it feels like. I've contemplated multiple times whether there's a different way or a better way for me to share my message because of the pushback, but I'll tell you where I'm at with it now.
Yeah.
I have been in absolute poverty where I have no food and I have no resources and I have no shelter and it's cold and I'm not well. Like, I've lived that. And when I was there, before I started taking care of my mind and my spirit, my nervous system, what felt more like an energetic match for me to talk about, where I felt the most seen, was where rich people suck and men suck, and you've got to break through from your family because you're the black sheep and you don't fit in, and friends are terrible and women are terrible and everything's terrible. Like, that was actually much more where I felt seen and understood, and I could have had conversations like that for hours
Oh,
easily.
yeah.
Like, let's
Yeah,
just
people
talk
will
about.
that's like the lion's share of social media, I feel like.
Yeah, but because it feels like someone understands you, which is a fundamental, important part of life. And so when things are not going well, you don't want to feel on top of everything not going well, you feel alone. That sucks. And I feel like we talk a lot about victim mentality, but to me, what a victim mentality means really is that someone is a villain in your life. That's how I comprehend my victim era, is that there was very clearly defined villains in my life. The government was a villain. My ex-partner was a villain. My parents were villains. People who treated me in a way that made me be a certain way. There was a villain in my life. And that made me the victim, because you don't just be a victim without a villain. You just can't be. Someone's doing something to you. And so when you feel that way and you feel alone, you feel victimized, telling your side of the story is the only thing that makes you feel less alone. And there's immense value in that. There's
Sure.
immense value in saying, can I just tell you how I feel? And can I tell you what this person has done to me? And someone go like, oh my God, can I tell you what's happening to me? And like, oh my God, there's immense value in that. But when these breakthroughs started occurring for me, what I realized is that It is, and I'm saying this from my perspective, and so important for anyone going through this that's in this victim moment where it feels like someone is doing something to you right
Right,
now.
right.
And
They're
obviously,
hurting
we're
you.
talking about this in a mentality. So we're not talking about victims, we're talking about victim mentality. If you are in a
Sure.
victim situation, this is entirely different. But the people who feel mentally victimized by a situation can't get themselves out of it with their own power because something feels blocked. That's who we're talking about right now. But what I realize is that the only person that I am helping in that way of being is me, and possibly one other person that's also feeling victimized that I listen to, kind of, but I'm really just waiting for them to finish their sentence so I can tell them how bad my thing is. And so the only person I'm really serving in my life during that is myself. My pain, my story, my hurt, my guilt, my shame, my inadequacies, my need to talk, my need to be understood, my need to be seen, my need to be validated. It's all about me. When I'm doing the work that I'm doing now, what I think a lot of people don't realize because maybe haven't broken through yet, and this is something I wish more people would just consider, is that until you've done it, you can't understand it fully. And so it's normal that you don't value it, but destroying something you don't understand or attempting to destroy something you don't understand isn't very mature. It's like, give yourself a minute to understand. It's like little kids that say, when I'll be a grown up, my kids will be allowed to eat candy whenever they want. They'll never get in trouble. I'll never be mean. I'll never be impatient. When I have kids, I'll never treat them this way. Fast forward, it's like, eat your broccoli or you're going to bed. Like something happens in the small child that doesn't even know what responsibility is, that says, when I have power, I'm going to use it differently. And I think a lot of us have that thought. When I have power, I'll use it differently.
Yeah.
And so becoming the person that I've become has been very challenging because I've wanted to bring forward conversations where people who aren't there yet feel like they're not a part of the conversation. Like, I'm still feeling victimized by somebody and you want to talk to me about freedom. Like the gap between the conversations is so huge. And oh, it's easy for you to just soar above the problem. But what about us that are still in the problem? And I don't know that I'd be able to have this much strength in believing in what I'm saying if I hadn't really felt what it feels like to feel entirely victimized as well.
Yeah.
Like I know what the frequency is. I absolutely get it. And I've really contemplated where I'm more helpful for the world. And I've realized that here, where I am now, I am more helpful. And I'm not saying bypass pain. I'm not
Sure.
saying that you've got to be high vibe and you've got to cut out all the people in your life that don't know how to be high vibe. That's not my message at all. What my message is we can become more mature, more emotionally, spiritually mature, where we don't need a victim or we don't need a villain or a hero in our storyline, where there is no one that makes us or breaks us, where we really have this moment of self actualization where we say, okay, let me reshuffle the deck because I don't like these cards and I've been making the deck responsible for my whole life. And let me reshuffle this deck and let me see what I can do. And I'm going to go through pain and I'm going to go through suffering and I'm going to go through guilt and shame and inadequacy. And I'm going to be jealous of other people who've done it better than me. And I'm going to wonder if I'm good enough. And I'll feel betrayed and I'll believe in people who turn against me. And I'm going to fall on my face and no one will help me. And the people I help will turn on me. And the people I don't help will do better than me. And the whole thing will feel like a sham. And I'll be mad 100 million times. And then something in my spirit will get something that I'm
Yeah.
supposed to get in this lifetime. And I'm going to set myself free where I no longer need a hero to save me and I no longer need a villain to make me the victim so that I have a reason to stay small. And instead, I'm going to just find like a gateway for my own self actualization. And what happened for me is I realized that when I claimed I don't want to just help myself, I want to be a gateway for people to access their power. That's actually what I want. I asked myself, do I really believe it's possible to be a gateway for power without ever having anyone try to destroy me? Is it even mature in any way to imagine that it would be possible to do that? And I thought of all the leaders in the world that have gone before me with big missions. And I've asked myself if I really imagined they had a smooth ride. And I came to the conclusion that I don't think they had a smooth ride. I came to the conclusion that each one of them that ever stood for something was asked to sit down. I came to the conclusion that if it matters, it's going to be tested because leaders are bridges and bridges are tested. And I feel like we're either in for the world or we're in for ourselves. And I'm in for the world and I'm here to learn. Like if I learn a better way throughout my life, I'll pivot, I'll course correct. I don't need to be right. I want to change things. I just won't be silenced by someone who hasn't even done close to what I've done yet,
Yeah.
telling me what I should do. And I feel like anyone who thinks they're in a position to tell someone what to do when they don't even know what it's like to be who they are. Like, you don't value my life, my journey, my mind, my breakthroughs. You value your opinion, your thoughts of what you'll do if you ever do what I've done. I don't want to know what that is. Do what you say you do and do it well, and then school me, and I will listen to you. I will sit right there and I'll listen to every word you say. But don't get out of my way right now,
Yeah.
because I don't think you understand what you're saying, because you haven't yet created the thing you're idealizing. You haven't yet created the thing you preach. You haven't yet created the thing you say you
Right.
would do. So do that, and then we'll meet at the crossing and we'll do better together. But you got to meet me here, though. And in doing that, it's needed a lot of strength. It's not been easy every day. But what I've really found is that not a lot of people who talk loud have the power to back up what they say. And
Absolutely.
I've really gone from nothing to building what I have, and I've done that with a lot of listening, a lot of respect, a willingness to be wrong, to course correct, but with a knowing that I won't be silenced, because I wasn't gonna let the world tell me how I was inadequate when I had nothing, and I certainly won't let the world tell me I'm inadequate now when my entire life is for the well-being of for me, for you, for us. I'm
Mm.
gonna trust my mission with an open mind and an open spirit, because again, I don't think I'm perfect, but I just don't follow the whole, I think you should have done this until you've
Right.
done
Yeah. It's a variation on mansplaining to me.
it. Mm,
Sometimes it's womansplaining. Like, as a woman, I'm really passionate about this. I'm called over here. Why aren't you over here with me? When that's their thing. And they're trying to literally, I've seen teachers do this, literally shame
yeah.
everyone who's not over there with them, metaphorically or figuratively, holding a picket sign, groveling, advocating for change. But that's where they're called. And if everyone joined over there,
There'd
we
be
would
nothing
have
holding the
great
fort here.
imbalance.
We
Yeah.
would. So this is another way I've made peace with this. I have seen myself claim a level of power that no one gave me. I just decided I'm taking it. And the level of power I've decided to claim is one where I am the gateway to power for other people.
Mm,
And so, what I really want to see happen is people come into my world to learn how to hold themselves in a position of power, how to communicate, how to handle the trauma and the hurt and the triggers that come with other people telling you what you should be talking about and how and when. How do you handle this kind of impact on your relationship, your family life, your friendships, your employees, peers? How do you handle this power without turning your heart off? How
yeah.
do you handle your self-importance rising and your love for the world rising at the same time? How do you do that? Because if I can hold that position of being the one, being the gateway, then
Yeah.
I can say it's not my mission to see your mission through, but it is my mission to ensure that you see your mission through.
Mm,
And I see Alpha Femme like a multiplier, a person who has the capacity to do what they want to do on the planet through our work together will be amplified.
mm,
A person who wants to see their vision of the world be done, but wants to make someone else responsible for it, they want a hero, will always vilify me, because I won't be told what to say and I won't be told what to do. That's part of the modeling I feel is
yeah.
important for any woman who wants to walk with me, is they need to
Yeah.
learn to not do that for themselves also.
So a lot of this is conservation, retaining your power. You're talking about a lot of what you're talking about is voice and also visibility, but I think that's a huge thing for women, those two things. I'm sure you would agree. But like, I love everything you're saying because it's almost trusting who's coming into your path and allowing them to be your student and your teacher. And there's that reciprocal relationship, which is super healthy. It's why we're all coming into each other's paths. That's
Yes.
exactly why. So if people come into my programs, I'm learning from them and we're rejoicing together on, being able to step into our power as we define it. Before we move, I could keep talking to you because I love everything you're saying. But I would love for you to define in your own way what feminine power is. Because let me just tell you some of the pushback I've gotten when I'm around men and other women who are trying to talk about all this masculine, feminine, energy and whatever. And there's just so much distortion out there around this. But sometimes if I feel like I'm really resting into my presence, into my still point, let's just say that the field of limitless possibility or infinite creation, I'm in it. That's a powerful place for me. And sometimes people will say, or if I speak, or if I insert myself into a situation that I feel passionate about, or if I use boldness, I've literally been told, get out of your masculine. And even though I know when I'm doing these things that I'm very centered, I feel very inner, very much that I'm in inner alignment. And it's just got me thinking, we need, and I talk a lot about masculine, feminine energies and yin and yang and equanimity and balance on this podcast. But I've been thinking a lot lately about does the world really know yet what to do with a woman who is in her power?
Mm.
So resting into that in authentic ways without being told she's in her masculine. Maybe she is.
The
But
sentence, get out of your masculine, is a very masculine sentence.
yeah,
Because the feminine expression of that would be, I feel something when you speak this way. Like, I feel pushed when you feel this way. Or I feel pushed when you speak this way. I feel pressured in this energy of conversation. That would be a feminine approach. So any woman who tells you get out of your masculine is actually trying to output you somehow, like that,
yeah.
because
But
that's
I've
not the
I've
way.
gotten it I've gotten it from men in the spiritual space.
For sure. But the feminine approach to telling a person you're in masculine energy is not to tell them stop doing that. That's not a feminine approach. And in
Mhm,
the masculine, if you want to tell a person stop being in your masculine, well, why?
mhm.
Is it because you feel threatened by my masculine? Because this is the other part. I don't believe in just being in your feminine. Same as I don't believe that
Oh,
men should just be in their
but there are
masculine.
some teachers that are propagating that if you're a woman, you should always lead with your feminine.
But in the sentence, if you're a woman, you should, that
Exactly.
is masculine, which means that the very woman who's saying that does not understand her teachings. So, my feeling about it is that we each have to find our balance. This is an individual journey.
Or I
This is
totally 100%.
diverse and unified. So everyone has to find their balance. And some people have a more prevalent masculine balance, and some people have a more feminine balance. And that is the truth for all genders. And
Sure.
it's not because you're a woman that you should be more feminine. It's just that when you feel like you have to be masculine or else you don't have respect, that's when these teachings become powerful. It's never about telling people how they should operate. It's about having a discussion about, have you thought the only way you could be respected was by being this way? And is that exhausting to you? And do you feel like you're going against your spirit? Because if you are in a very masculine energy and that's exactly what feels right to you, no one has anything to say. These trainings, these teachings are never about telling people who they should be. They're discussions to open our mind and spirit about what our unique expression of power gets to look like. And
Mhm.
I do feel that it's difficult for people in general on the planet to be comfortable with anyone being fully okay with choosing their balance and their way of being powerful. Because when I feel like I'm boxed in and I'm not allowed to be this way, and I'm not allowed to be that way, and I'm not allowed to be this way, and you're showing up in this different way than me and it's working for you, I'm very triggered by that because you're allowed, or you're giving yourself the right to do something
Yeah.
I've been told my whole life I'm not allowed to do.
And I really think that's it. I really think when people are saying that, there's a trigger response for them based on their past conditioning because they are imprisoned. They have not been given or have given themselves the permission to express. And by you expressing that, they're like, well, how do you get to do that? And I don't. So come back
Right.
down here with me. And yeah.
And the other part that gets to go with that also, which I think is an important thing to remember, is that sometimes the person who's pushing a certain thing, it's self-serving. So the leader that gets paid to teach people that they're doing it all wrong and they need to learn how to be feminine will obviously be very controlling with the narrative that you need to be a certain way. And I feel like that is how you can sense it. It's like, does it serve you to push this?
Mhm.
And if it does, you can take it with a grain of salt, because it's a very human thing when we start to have power and to realize, like, oh, I'm being respected. My words are being respected, to say, let me be really pushy with this to see how much more power I can get. It goes to people's minds if they don't really do the inner work, if it comes from a place of filling a gap or a wound and it's like, if your journey is to create power, if your journey is to create money, if your journey is to create success and to be seen, you might bypass so many things on that journey because the deep healing and the realizations about yourself and humanity, they're not necessarily a part of your journey. And I don't know even that that's wrong, because I think that we learn through contrast and validation as human beings. And if we didn't see what we didn't want, it'd be hard to know what we really do want. So no one that behaves that way can sabotage humanity. It's just an example of what a different kind of power that may not be what you're looking for looks like. And so the way I really experience it for myself is I'm constantly learning through validation and contrast what it is and who it is that I am and why I am. And that journey is a one step at a time, one day at a time, 1 year at a time, pivot, course correct, with the freedom to change as often as I want and to go back and to say what I've learned and to try something different, to change my mind. That feels like the feminine energy approach. But I do have a strong masculine balance also. Like, I'm not just feminine, I'm a very balanced masculine feminine, but I know when to use which ones. And I can tell in my body when that masculine is coming through as a need to control my feelings or control a situation to try to avoid
Or
pain
protect yourself. Yeah. That
versus
part
when
comes
it's
strongest for me.
yeah, versus when that masculine is coming in because I'm in need of some structure in order for the feminine to flow. And that's a lot of self-realization, emotional maturity. But that's not always the voyage for everyone. And I feel like the reason the way I speak is realistic but idealistic in nature is because the nature of my work is for this new paradigm on earth. And so
Yeah.
it's all within it's all within a very introspective lens. I don't think everyone needs to be this introspective for their lives to work. That's just my life's work.
Yeah, I think a lot of us who feel called to be in the arena, as Brene Brown calls it, don't take feedback. I can't remember how she says it, but it's like, if you're not also in the arena getting your ass kicked, um, you don't get to be giving me feedback. Like, so for a lot of us who are in the arena because we love humanity, our deepest core value and desire is to serve because we love so much. Not everyone who loves humanity is called to show up that way, but I'm just saying, like, that place of unapologetically answering the call to be uniquely yourself is why you need to keep doing what you're doing and why I need to keep doing what I'm doing, even with the haters, even with the pushback, even with the naysayers, even with the dream stealers and killers, because something inside of them is also inspired. And this is where the compassion has come in for me, for the people casting stones, to use a biblical reference, right? Like, the compassion comes in. It's kind of like Jesus saying, like, they know not what they do. They really don't. They've been conditioned and taught to throw stones. They've been conditioned and taught to project and blame and be in wallowing in that self-pity. But also, I have hope that there's going to be some kind of, and maybe you're with me on this, some kind of critical mass awakening that you had when you saw the snowflake, like
Mhm.
such a beautiful visual, that everyone will realize it's up to them. And for people like you and I who are trying so desperately to guide people as those gateway bridge, souls, to be able to hold that tension and also with compassion and also unapologetically using our voices and establishing that compassion within that framework.
What I
Uh,
love about what you just said, though, is hold the tension. Because the part that I think a lot of leaders, in the last few years, a lot of people emerged as I'm a leader and I'm doing this work for humanity. And there was a lot of people that came and went. And one of the big patterns that I saw were people who cared about humanity and wanted the world to do better, but were not willing to do that work for themselves. And so they would take a course or they would learn from a teacher just to sell that same course. Like, there was not a lot of,
just
if I were to
parroting. They're
ask a
just
person,
parroting what they learned. Yeah.
yeah, like if I asked a person, tell me your story, there wasn't a lot of lived experience. It was more learned experience. And so where I feel we've really got something to work on if we're going to make the difference we want to make. And this is my truth, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's universal, but my belief is that I won't ever see the real outcome of my work on this planet, that it'll actually survive or not after I'm gone, because it's going to take me a lifetime to actually prove the proof of concept that what I believe works, because I'll have to have been the full lived embodiment of that from the moment I declared it to the moment I died. And
Mm.
so, will it even really hold until after I'm done? That's the real challenge. And so, for a lot of people, they've been successful for a few years and they don't want to listen to anybody else's thing and they can't hold the tension, they can't be challenged. They can't be in a discussion that's healthy and compassionate with a person with a different opinion because there's this trigger and there's this I need to be right or I'm angry or I'm mad or you don't get to talk to me this way or you don't. And I feel like if we don't have the ability to hold that tension, we want to punish people as soon as they don't agree with us or they're not happy with us,
Mhm.
that also becomes very difficult and very challenging. And I think there's a lot of people right now that are just on a rampage of challenging every other person that's also trying to do at work. And
Yeah.
I find it interesting because if I were to be on a podcast with you, I agree to a podcast with you, we're here, I've given you my consent, we're discussions, everything's on the table, and you want to bring a different opinion than me, I will treat you with as much respect as if you were asking me to talk about something that I enjoy talking about because I gave my consent to this conversation.
Sure.
But I feel like where a lot of people are missing the mark of what this work is really about is they want to ambush a person in the middle of leading their mission to talk about something entirely opposite or to tell them, why aren't you talking about this or why aren't you doing it this way? And that's not leadership. That's an ambush. It's being hit in the back. It's all the things that we're trying to avoid in physical violence and now emotional and verbal violence. Let me get you where you're least expecting it. Let me get you while you're eating dinner with your family when your nervous system isn't ready for a debate. Let me get you in the middle of your own program on social media, on a post, in a comment for a thing that doesn't even have anything to do with what you're doing when you're not prepared for a debate, when you haven't given your consent to be violated in your opinions and your mind and your thoughts. Like that's where people want to battle. And I feel like that's why we're getting a little bit of pushback right now in the growth, because I really feel like we could be growing a lot faster than we are. The amount of connection and discussion that's available on the planet for people who can hold themselves in a debate if we wanted, we could expedite the process of thinking and feeling and humanity so much, but people don't know how to hold themselves in a conversation without being violent or being like, I am having this conversation only for you to trip. I don't want to learn as much as I speak. I want to teach you. I want to school you, and I want you to and fall so that people can see that you're not as good as you think you are. And I feel like that's where we're failing, because
Yeah.
if instead we were constantly raising the bar for each other and saying, I love what you're doing, and let's talk about this. What are your thoughts on this? Could we do more of this? I
Mhm.
really value this. How can we bring more of this? These
And let me sit
discussions.
with you in the pain and how you have felt that someone has usurped false power over you. I
Fair?
want to understand that. Yes, I believe that's the only way that all of what you're saying, along with that compassion and holding the tension, like we were not given the skills to do this. We were not given the interpersonal skills. We were told to choose a camp. We were told to choose a political party. We were told, you know what I mean? Like, it's like you were saying when you were trying to take the tests in school and like, this isn't, and so it's beautiful what it's definitely a shared vision for me is, and I don't say this with any kind of gender bias, but I believe it will be women who are leading us into this next, you talked about this new era of humanity or the new earth. Not that men will not. It's going to be very gender balanced. But first, there has to be this recalibration of I guess, the collaborative tendencies that women hold, and being able to have the emotional intelligence that came into this world with being heart based and anchored in your heart. Like that is what is going to get men to take. You could call it the patriarchy, you could call it, but it really is just that ideology, like having power over
Yeah.
instead of power with.
But that's an energy, not a gender.
Yes,
And
yes.
why I'm really like, this is something that has changed for me over time a lot. Once I really understood energetics, is that the issue is not men or women, it's the expectation of gender. And so for a long time, men were valued for their ability to create wealth and to have power. And so holding on to those two things were a very big part of whether they'd be loved, accepted, admired. And
Mhm.
when you consider that men were chosen based on their financial status and their power status, this warped a lot of the reasoning behind what they were doing. And when you think of, I've had a lot of discussions with men and I've had a lot of discussions with women. And one of the discussions that really got me thinking was this, like, a lot of women say that what they do in life is all in the name of love. And that's why they are going to be the ones to lead the world to change. But when I really listened to the men's perspective with an open mind, what I also got was that all men wanted with their money and their power was also love. That's what they want. That's what they were trying to conquer. And
Mhm.
so it was just done in a controlling way because that was the way that they knew. And we had time while we weren't even in the game to contemplate how we would do it differently. But the thing is, now we're being tested to see if we would do it differently. And the sad thing is to watch women come into power and control just as fast as the men did, and to try to self-sabotage and to talk badly about each other, and to create a verbal war, an emotional war on each other, and to say, how different is this really? Because as soon as we were given the opportunity for power, did we just do the same thing? And so for me, it's keeping an open heart and saying the only reason we believe we could do better is because while we didn't have the opportunity to, we were contemplating what our move would be. But that's idealistic in nature because we haven't yet had a chance to live it out. And from what I'm seeing, the women that are coming into power aren't always nailing it. They're doing very similar things. So it's about learning and saying, whoa, in practice, power feels very different than in contemplative thought. We think when we get to the power and the money, we're going to do things so differently. But I see people do exactly the same thing, just in a different war. It's an emotional war. It's a spiritual war instead of a physical war. But it's violent nonetheless. It's the
Right.
online bullying. It's the people being so harmful that it destroys a person's spirit. Like that is the same kind of control, coercive control. It's just not physical violence. So what I would have us contemplate on our journeys of being women in power is to say, can I give compassion to the men who didn't have someone else to watch? They didn't watch other people fail first and say, we can do better. We actually have that. A lot of women for a very long time said, if I ever had the power, I'd do it different. Well, let's prove it.
Thank you. That really nails it. And you're right, it is not about gender. It's about cultivating the unique feminine and masculine energies in each soul. I have 3 sons and 3 brothers, and I'm a husband of 29 years. And I've watched them try to be in this world and be defined by what you just referenced, by how much power and status and wealth that could possibly be the defining factor in their contribution to this world and their worth as men. And I didn't raise my sons that way. They're still saying to me, Mom, like it's still a thing for women, like the girls we're dating and whatnot, right? So, but thank you for offering that. It's spot on. It's exactly how I feel. And in saying I see women leading out, I don't see it leading out in the way of here we are, and like in the Barbie movie at the end where all the Supreme Court justices are women, and like that was obviously overblown to make a point. But I see it as the feminine rising in both genders
That
and
is
coming
beautiful.
into balance and equanimity with what we were told the masculine needed to be.
See, that is an ideology that I can get very excited about. The feminine rising in all genders, because that will create balance. All of us know what masculine feels like. What we're lacking is that feminine, in my opinion. And what's so important when you're listening to me speak, and this is probably why I allow myself to speak on so many different topics, is I'm very clear that I don't need people to agree with me at all on anything I say. As a matter of fact, if I've helped you figure out that you believe the entire opposite, you're welcome also. It doesn't matter whether you go and you leave a conversation with me going, you nailed it, and that's exactly what I think, or whether you said, thank you for being so clear on what you believe because it really helped me see that I believe the entire opposite. Here's what I believe. And as long as there's respect, if we
Mhm.
can all just find our missions, then no one will be left behind. I really do believe if we can just see this, this is what I see as feminine power is equal power, but different, shoulder to shoulder. What you bring to the table, what I bring to the table, what they bring to the table, what every single unique person has to bring that is valuable, and how we can each learn from that and hear from that and grow from that. Whether it's what we agree with or not, what can we take away? Because if not, it perpetuates the story that you need a villain or a hero in order for you to become what you were meant to be. And so whether you heard this and I'm your hero and I've said everything that was right for you, or whether you heard this and I'm your villain and you need to spend the rest of your life disproving everything I've said, you would have wasted an opportunity to have just listened and become your own person. And that's really what I'm wanting people to be in my presence, is to understand, like, that's what we need more of, co-creative intelligence. That's a great point.
Yeah.
Here's what I'm thinking. And I really value what you said. And you know what it made me realize? Okay, well, here's an interesting point because you say this, but what about this? Okay, I see that point. Okay, let me contemplate. Let me think of that. This is where we're going to get to a more universal truth. Nobody needs to be right. We've got to be willing to just advance with
Mm.
speaking and listening and caring for me, for you, for us. We do that, we're going to get where we're going so much faster. And if we can make peace with the fact that we're doing this for generations far beyond us, because we probably will never see the full benefit of what we're doing in this lifetime, then we can drop the ego and actually start moving, because there's a lot of work to do.
Mm, so eloquently stated. Thank you. Thank you
Thank
for your
you.
presence. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing from your heart, from your vast emotional intelligence, and for the work you're doing in the world. I really honor it and I see you. So, what a blessing that you could be with us. And Melanie, how can people find you? Where's your go to place?
My go-to place is my social media. So this is an interesting thing about me. I've built my entire career on social media. I still don't even have a website, and I have a brand that's made $70 million in the last 5 years, all through
Wow.
organic social media. But what I love is using social media as an art gateway to express myself. And so it's through video, animations, writing, photography. I do my own photography, like
Mm,
everything. My
it's
social media is
amazing.
like my
Yeah.
artwork. It's what I'm grateful for. It's what I look at, what I value, what I see, my words, my thoughts. So following my social media, you'll always know what's coming up. So either on my Alpha Femme or Mélanie Ann Layer Instagram, or even on Facebook, that's really the way to stay connected. And then when I have master classes, you'll always know, or if I've got programs coming, you'll always know.
Great. Thank you again, Melanie. And I encourage everyone to see what she's about. If nothing else, go look at her absolutely stunning Instagram page. Just saying. Thank you,
Thank
Melanie.
you. Thanks for having me.
So, this episode was a power conversation, co creative intelligence between the masculine and feminine, releasing like survivor guilt or feeling guilty for having something that others don't have, recognizing that we all have our own journeys and our own paths and our own purpose, and that we need to listen to our heart and help to liberate others by stepping into our own presence and power. Again, you can find Melanie on Instagram at Alpha Femme. And just a reminder that the Women's Wisdom Circle is now open for enrollment. Go to my website, cherieburton.com, scroll down a little bit and you'll see it there on the homepage. Or you can go to standspeakshine.com/WWC. Have a fabulous week, and we'll talk to you next time on The Soul Rose Show.